What makes a horror game scary? What is it that gets under your skin and leaves some sense of dread and foreboding? Is it the way your footsteps can echo throughout the silence of a dark cobblestone corridor when you know you're not alone? Or the way the gritty details of a scene can add up to say something gruesome or leave you altogether awestruck? There's a certain feeling you get when a game manages to dig its nails under your skin and really rattle your bones. I'm not sure there's a word for it, but if you've ever played a truly scary game, you know that feeling. There's something about the way this game hooks the player at the opening sequence of the game that just gets me every time. Jack arrives to Innsmouth on a bus, talking to a reluctant driver as the dull browns and grays of the buildings rush past. The conversation is something like,
"Why lock the gates?"
"Keeps out wanderers looking for work. We don't want no folks like that interfering with our affairs."
The player is then nudged into the local motel upon arriving, and will likely notice this painted white eye on the wall, enabling them to save their game, so now they know they have to find a save point to save progress. From then on, they'll be mingling with the townsfolk, and will likely notice their growing hostility towards Jack, and their morbid flabby features as well.
"The name's Jack Walters. I'm just visiting."
"You don't say, sir. Gilman. Charlie Gilman."
Everything is off. It's dark and dirty around the town, and several warnings from the few normal people you'll run into, or conversations you'll likely overhear, will have you on edge. And if you poke around enough, you might even see a few things you weren't supposed to. The open-endedness of Innsmouth in this segment, combined with Jack's involuntary hallucinatory visions, create a truly chilling atmosphere, and for the first chunk of the game, this is what it's like. You have no weapons, but you can interact with many NPCs to figure out where you'll need to go next, as you piece together where the missing Burnham boy is and unintentionally unravel the secrets of Innsmouth and its people. Compare this to Amnesia, the Dark Descent intro, which has you wandering about a mostly empty castle with little info as to who you are or what's going on. Now, I'm not saying this game is better than Amnesia in any way. In fact, the only part of this game that does better in any respect than Amnesia is this opening, and for what it's worth, the Dark Descent's intro suited itself and put the player directly into gameplay in as little as a few seconds. Each respective title has its own way of creating atmosphere and building up to something more later into the game, and on their own terms differ greatly in many aspects. Both games share a sanity mechanic, and each of them work well in their own regards, and to be truthful, I'm not sure which innovates the mechanic more, as in Call of Cthulhu, Jack can experience visual and auditorial hallucinations just as Daniel can in Amnesia, with the former leaving me less skeptical of which moments were scripted or not. Overall, Amnesia succeeds for much longer at creating the terrifying atmosphere both games set out to create initially, with Cthulhu coming to a staggering pace in the long run. But I'm not here to tell you this game is a bad one and that you should never play it, because it's ultimately a creative and atmospheric game. And if you're even remotely a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, you owe it to yourself to pick it up and try it. You might want to grab a guide, and the PC port of the game has a game-breaking bug a quarter of the way from the ending, but you can download a fan-made patch to fix this, and even have a few other options as well, but I won't get into that. It's a great game, and it's very faithful to its source material as well, which is a dime a dozen for anything these days. But if you're not into a game that starts slowly, stumbles as much as it shines, and burns out slowly into a convoluted and long game, then this isn't the game for you. Disapproves. Yeah, go play this game.
Seriously, go play this game before I fucking ruin everything.
fatal flaws.
God damn it, Larry.
With said, let me start off by saying this game frustrated the piss out of me. It had to be one of the most initially enticing yet slow-burning and mechanically flawed good games I've played. And I say good with a grain of salt.
What better time to discuss a Cthulhu game than now, not long after a new Cthulhu game has been announced. So let's discuss what this game does wrong, and what its newest developers could learn from this old gen.
First off, the stealth is some of the worst I've had to deal with in a game. Your character already moves slowly to begin with no run or sprint buttons, and the sneak option doesn't appear to make you much less visible than you already were. It suggests using sneak to scope out enemies and plot a path, and that could work if it made you less visible or maybe made you move faster as you snuck, but it doesn't. And the game relies on stealth in more than a few areas, and suggests it over and over in the loading screens between maps.
Enemies and stealth could really work in a game like this, if the enemies were stronger and there was less of an emphasis on gunplay, like there was in Alien Isolation, but frequent encounters with grunt-like enemies and loads of ammo makes for monotonous gameplay, when stealth or shooting could just be used to break up the tediousness between segments of gameplay.
The save points become a bother too, because you'll be replaying frustrating segments again and again and again, both taking part in gunfights and stealth segments, both of which become increasingly frustrating on each failure. This could be avoided if the save points were better placed in specific segments of the game, but some are just downright bogus. The level design is just absurd at times, and overall lacks a good amount of conveyance, leaving the player constantly questioning where to go and what to do at times, especially the first time around. Some maps are just so hard to read that you'll pass over where you're supposed to be going again and again, resulting in long chunks of play just trying to figure out where the hell you've got to go. This doesn't have fully to do with level design either, but the game after a certain point just seems to drag on, and even then keeps going longer than you'd think it would, with lackluster boss fights against the likes of beings nobody could imagine taking on. But from a gameplay perspective, someone has to fill the role. But from that same view, the boss fights themselves are uninspired and mostly uninteresting, and at times don't even feel like they're boss fights at all. Lastly, there's the shooting aspect of the game, which does about as well as a guy with 2 broken feet and crutches trying to get down the stairs alone. For the most part, it's gonna work, and it's entirely possible, but I'll be damned if it's not gonna be a struggle. The sanity system can be really intrusive on the gunplay, sometimes forcing you into fleeing as well, and the system in itself is mostly good, but it can be way too aggressive at times and can even result in a game over.
The newest Call of Cthulhu game is going to have to be tense and unnerving, desolate and exhausting. It'll have to do so while stepping up against the unpredictable AI of the alien in Alien Isolation, and the dark and haunting corridors of Amnesia as well. It's going to have a rich story with a gripping yet hopeless conclusion, and stand out against games with lush environments like Frictional Games' Soma, or the anxious and terrifying hallways of Outlast's Massive Asylum, while hopefully bringing some innovative new spins on gameplay mechanics that could possibly make the gameplay even more horrifying. But that's with a lot of hope, and it might even be too much to ask for, even from a large developer, but I can tell you now that that's what's going to succeed.
So that's what score do you have in mind? Well, Zed, I'd say this one gets a...
This one gets...
Damn, you're terrible. This one gets a 7 out of 10.